I'm a 35-year-old female and my story takes place when I was 15, but it feels like yesterday. It was the day that would change my innocent youth forever. I'm from a little village in Ireland with a population of a few hundred. The nearest town is about 10 miles away. Growing up in rural Ireland was very idealistic. Summers were spent playing football with neighbors or going to the lake swimming till the sun went down. I was lucky that even though the population is small and the houses are far apart, that my best friend's house was only down the road. So during those summer months, Mary and I were inseparable. My friend and I grew up with lots of brothers and sisters in a safe village. We were given a lot of freedom and sometimes we were gone all day and only came back before dark. As it was the middle 90s and we had no phones, but our moms knew we would be okay and look out for each other. One thing that we liked to do during these summer months, besides going to the lake and hanging out at each other's houses, was to go to town and look around the shops. The easiest way to get into town was to hitchhike, as there were no buses. Here in Ireland, we call it thumbing. Hardly anyone hitches now because most households have 2 cars and parents are a lot more protective. But back in the 80s and 90s, it was very common. Our parents were okay with it, but there were certain rules that we had to follow. I'm not entirely sure who came up with the rules, but I assume that our parents did. Rule number 1. Never hitch alone. You must thumb with at least 1 or 2 friends. Number 2. Never take a lift if there are 2 or more men in the car, but 2 or more women is fine. Number 3. Never take a lift from someone in a van. There could be more guys hiding in the back or worse, ropes, blindfolds, etc. Number 4. And this was the most important rule. When a car stops to pick you up, always ask the driver where they're going first. If you tell them where you're going first, they could pretend that they're going to the same place to lure you in. We were innocent but had common sense, so we followed the rules down to a T. At least we tried to. My friends Mary and I used to hitch once a week during the summer. We would go to town with a population of only a few thousand and look around the shops, eat ice cream and hang out. When we got a ride, we had to make small talk with the driver and his 2 shy 15-year-olds. This bit sucked the most. To make it fair, we took turns sitting in the front and did most of the talking. One day, we spent a few hours in town. It was pretty uneventful, so we decided to thumb it back. At around 3 p.m., we went to the usual spot to hitch from, just on the outskirts of town. We were only waiting for about 5 minutes when a white car pulled up. And before we could ask where he was going, he asked us first. My friend told him and he said that he was passing through our village on the way to another one. Rule number 4 broken, but he seemed nice enough and we just wanted to go home. It was my turn to sit in the front. The driver introduced himself as John, a farmer, and was super friendly. He was dressed in a worn t-shirt with holes in it. He had tattered pants and smelled of cow poop. The car was full of bits of straw and was old and battered like the driver. He was about 60, had no wedding ring on. Don't ask me why, but I always noticed these little things. About halfway between town and our home village, he asked if we heard a noise, and we didn't reply. "There it is again. It sounds like a banging noise," he said. I didn't hear anything, so I sat there quietly. "No, I think it might be the exhaust pipe," he said. "I'll have to pull in and have a look." He pulled up on a busy road and went out to take a look. "I didn't hear anything," said Mary. "He seems like a weirdo," I said. Call it intuition, but even though he was super friendly and chatty, I got a bad feeling from him. The next thing he comes back to the driver's side and tells us that the exhaust is hanging down and it was hitting off the road, and he needs us to help him tie it up. It was then that I noticed that he had a string holding up his pants instead of a belt. I thought this was odd. Anyway, he got some string of the boot, same color string as his belt, and we both got out of the car. Although I got a bad vibe from him, I didn't feel scared at this stage. We were on a busy road and it was only about 3:30 p.m., so we both got out of the car. He showed us the exhaust pipe hanging down and used a rag to hold it up because it was hot. My friend Mary took over holding it up, while he secured it with the string. They were both kneeling while I just stood back and watched. It was then that I noticed his fly was open, and I could see his privates, and he was clearly not wearing any underwear. He didn't even have a belt, so I guess I wasn't too surprised. In my head I thought, oh my gosh, what is going on? Crap, but I said nothing. I just stood there in shock. Mary hadn't noticed at this stage and just continued to hold the pipe. When John was standing up, he noticed his fly was open and acted all shocked. Oh girls, I'm sorry and embarrassed. I only have a safety pin holding the fly together and it must have come off. Please forgive me and get back in the car. Mary was stunned and got a close-up on his privates, which left me to do the talking. I told him that it was okay and that it was an accident, so we got back in the car. He fastened the safety pin even though I didn't see him look for it. All was hidden again. Back in the car, the atmosphere was very different. We both felt mortified and he kept apologizing over and over. I looked out the passenger window and just repeated, it's okay, it's okay. Then he said something that turned my stomach. Oh well, girls, you had taken it very well. If I didn't know any better, I would swear that you liked it. And then he nudged me in the arm with his arm, like you do to a friend. I looked at him through the corner of my eye, my face still facing the window, when I noticed that his fly was undone again, and that he was exposed again. He must have noticed me looking because he said, "Oh, the safety pin keeps opening, just don't look." Fine by me, I thought, but I said okay and continued to look out the window. He kept nudging me and saying, don't be looking, giggling at the same time. He was doing this in a playful way, like it was all a joke. Mary started giggling too, because when she's nervous, she laughs. I knew it wasn't her fault, but I was getting angry at this stage. He wouldn't stop telling me to stop looking. And then he said, your friend is laughing, she must be enjoying the view. And this made her laugh even harder. Now remember, we're both polite 15-year-olds that always respect our elders and are a little shy, so I would never speak up to an adult. The nudging in my arm and my friend laughing was all getting to be too much. He asked if it was the first Willie that I had ever seen, and told me once again to stop looking. I was turned facing the passenger window, so much so that I had my back to him. There was no way that I could be looking. I lost my temper. I shouted at the top of my voice, I'm not looking. Mary, shut up and stop laughing. Silence followed. He said that he was sorry and that he was only joking and there was no need to be so serious. I said nothing and sat there, red with temper. I should have told him to let us out. I should have told him to cover himself up, the dirty old guy. But I was in shock too, and part of me wanted to believe it was all an innocent mistake. We finally arrived at our tiny, safe little village. We got out and he said again that he was sorry about the whole thing. My friend got her voice back and assured him that it was okay. I said that it was all okay and it was nothing to worry about. I said thanks for the lift. What he said back sickened me. He looked me up and down with this creepy smile and said, "Oh girlies, thanks for everything," and he drove off. We were left speechless. We sat down on a nearby bench to process all of this before going home. We made a deal that we wouldn't tell our parents there that they would never let us hitchhike again. My friend finally got her voice back and repeated, "What a weirdo, smelly old guy. He had this plan the whole time," over and over. About 5 minutes after sitting down on the bench, who drives by going the direction that we just came from? You guessed it, little old guy Farmer John, waving and smiling while we sat there stunned. He had beeped to catch our attention, so much for passing through our village. A few months later, and the ordeal went to the back of my mind. Occasionally, we would talk about Farmer John, but we made jokes about it and we told some of our friends about what had happened. One day, I told a friend of mine named Brid. A cousin of hers had told her a very similar story. The cousin lived in another village about 20 miles in the other direction from town. She was only a few years older than us. While hitchhiking home one day, the same thing happened to her and her friend. The exhaust, the safety pin, and the undone fly. It was no accident, and my worst fears were confirmed. Farmer John really was a weirdo. My name is Janelle. I'm a 21-year-old student living in France. Tired of not finding true love, I decide to lose my virginity with my best friend. And then I find a fantastic friend with benefits with which I get along wonderfully on all levels. For 3 months. And then comes the time to dump me because I still love my ex. I'm pretty fragile, so I kind of self-destructed and tried to hurt myself. And I was sent to the emergency and then the mental hospital. For the smart ones among you, you'll have understood that I was already in depression for a few months, with a strong penchant for alcohol. To complete this auto-destruction mechanism, what better than adding dating apps to the equation? A few weeks after my release from the mental hospital, I match up to make new encounters and especially forget my dear and tender friend with benefits. I always meet the guys at home for a first date, because I have zero experience and that's what I did for my very first date. One fine day comes around when I match a guy. Let's call him Matthew. Matthew isn't very beautiful and has a few extra pounds, but I'm not Beyonce either, so I match him. We laugh a little, we have some common interests, and especially he smokes weed, so I thought, perfect, plan to smoke some joints between two people. He gives me some personal information like his address, no idea if it's real or not, and his job, or rather old job, that he had just gotten fired from. Work or not work, I don't care, I don't want to do my life with him anyway. I explained to him that I'm pretty fragile and that I had just come out of a mental clinic, and that I'm depressed, blah blah blah. It's all for the sole purpose of making him understand that you can't play with me. I also tell him that I'm looking for a sex session, but still with discussion, complicity, hugs, etc., and not just a shot in 20 minutes and then it's done. He assures me that that is what he's looking for too, and that he's actually very cuddly. Well, perfect. After only about 1 or 2 days of discussion, we agree on a date. A mojito party at my house, and he brings some joints. Matthew arrives and he's really not cute, even worse than the photos. He has a dirty look like greasy hair and a stained t-shirt. A style of teenager who's still looking despite his 26-year-old. In short, I am far from wetting my panties, but I desperately need company. I offer him to make the drinks while I choose a film on television. He runs and passes on the kitchen side to prepare 2 mojitos before joining me on the sofa. We talk for a bit. He's not very smart or interesting. I finish my drink hoping to animate the party alone, and this is a 3-day blackout. According to our dear Matthew, we would have then drank and smoked while watching a film before going into the bedroom. I vaguely remember being naked on my bed and seeing him dressed above me looking at me before turning his heels and slamming the door. My phone was not charging and my alarm clock was not ringing. I was away from a work group appointment, so my friends were worried and they called me. They couldn't get a hold of me, so they reached out to my sister, but she also goes to voicemail. The girls come down from my house and ring again and again, but no answer. They call the fireman, who managed to open the bottom door but not the door to my apartment. They knock on the door calling me, and I eventually end up opening the door. Dressed in a blanket to hide my nakedness, I look at them with incomprehension. The firemen concluded that I was hungover and they break up, while my friends help me get dressed. They also think that I drank too much. They notice that my body is covered with yellow betadine on my arms, legs, and stomach. I told them that I had burned my arm yesterday and that I wanted to heal myself, but no sign of a burn or anything on my arm. And besides, I don't even own betadine. They take my cat and take me back to one of their houses since I was in a comatose state. I was having trouble speaking, and honestly, I even had trouble thinking. The next day, my sister comes to pick me up so that I can stay with her for a few days. Everybody's convinced that I tried to end myself with drugs and alcohol. I start complaining about pain in my groin, and my sister takes me to the hospital. Over the course of a week, I make a series of appointments for blood samples, urine samples, etc. And I went to file a complaint with the testimony of my friends who met me at home and my sister who took care of me. After talking about it for around me to people my age, older people, but especially medical staff and the police, the term organ trafficking was more than mentioned. They think the guy chickened out at the last minute. And despite my complaint, my bed full of betadine, my underwear torn off, and the blood on the doors of my apartment, I would like to point out that I used to drink and smoke in addition to my treatment, and that never before had I had a blackout of 3 days. I'm pretty sure that he put something in my drink. I am originally from rural northern Ontario, Canada, and I've always spent most of my time in the woods and nature, regardless of where we moved. Over the years, I've seen some weird stuff, but this experience surely takes the cake. When I was 16 years old, living with my mom in ruralish New Jersey, my best friend and I had an experience that we both still remember vividly, and my wife wants me to share the story to see what people think we saw. Now, my buddy and I, we used to cut through this farmer's field between my mom's neighborhood and our local mall, maybe a mile or so long. It rarely had crops over the years, maybe 1 year of corn and a few years cutting through if I remember it right. The field was barren on this day and we were headed to the mall to hang out, and we didn't notice anything unusual on the way to the mall through the field. We stayed at the mall for about an hour or two and we went back through the field to get back to my mom's. We didn't drink or eat anything in the mall that I remember. No drugs or alcohol either. When we got to the tree line between the field and the mall, we saw a handful of people all dressed somewhat similar, in overalls of some sort, plaid shirts collecting things off the ground. I figured that they were harmless and we knew the old guy's name who owned the field, so we probably wouldn't get yelled at if we name dropped it. As we made our way through the field and got closer, I remember feeling a lot of static energy. It looked like they were picking up smoking coals off the ground and throwing them into buckets. It was weird, but we didn't say anything to these folks and just kind of skirted around them until we were nearing the tree line back to my mom's neighborhood. We heard a loud whooshing noise, sort of like an air compressor. We turned back and there was a group of 6 identical white-suited men with helmets that looked like they were from Daft Punk, and they seemed to be shooting, silently like their weapons made no noise, at the folks picking those things up off the ground. Their sidearms looked like the guns used to spread weed killer or a paint sprayer, really long and thin. They didn't seem to notice us watching until my friend went into a panic and started freaking out. I grabbed him by his shirt and started dragging him toward the tree line, but he was in some sort of shock. I looked back as we were running as they were all facing us but not pursuing. My friend went home and we didn't talk to each other for about a week. Everyone we told to date has said that we were mad, minus my wife and father. I will say after the initial whooshing sound, we never heard another noise, not even a cricket for the whole encounter, until we made it back across the tree line. I'm curious to see what you all think. I am new to this, but my wife said that this was a glitch and other people have strange encounters and might want to hear them. My family and I had a caravan in a holiday park in NSW. We would go there every school holiday, and there were many kids that I used to run around and play with. I have fond memories of this place where I learned to ride a bike and I had my first kiss, but other memories are not as good, and now leave me with that egg flip feeling in my stomach. The people that owned the caravan park had a son. He was roughly 25 and I had to have been around 5 or 6 at the time. He would drive around the park and collect everybody's trash on a tractor and do other odd jobs like this to help out his parents. Every once in a while, he would pull up when I was playing out the front and asked if I wanted to go for a ride on the tractor. I, being young and naive, of course accepted and jumped on because what child doesn't want to ride on a tractor? This was back in the days where parents would let their children play in the streets without much supervision, and you just came back home when these streetlights came on. One day when he dropped me back to our van, my dad came storming out, grabbed me by the arm and yanked me off the tractor. Without saying a word to the man, he took me inside and told me to never ever hang out with him again. "I don't want you hanging around with that man again," he said without saying why. "But he's nice, he gives me lollipops," I say. "Just don't do it, I'm telling ya. Don't talk to him," he replied. Now I couldn't understand why my dad didn't want me talking to the nice man who only gave me tractor rides and lollipops and hugs, and sometimes the occasional sandwich. I remember telling the man one day, "My dad said I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore," to which he smirked and replied, "Oh yeah, why is that?" Now fast forward nearly 14 years later, my family and I are watching the news when the man's face flashes across the screen, attached to a story where he had killed 2 people, and now he's serving time in prison. My dad called over, look at this. I knew that he was bad news there. It was always just something about him. Do you remember when he used to take you around in that tractor?" My blood ran cold and my stomach dropped. And the most disturbing part, he killed people with pills that he would call his lollies. Please always listen to your parents. My God, I would be gone by now if it wasn't for them.